I'll get us started, and we are recording. Good evening, everybody. I'm Deanna Spagnola. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services for the Brighton Central School District. So happy to join you this evening with our special ed PTSA collaboration. We have Jackie O'Neill, who's on as well, and Amanda Dreyer will be joining too. And thank you so much for your collaboration in organizing this evening. I'll turn it over to Mr. Tappan, and we'll begin our presentation. There'll be time for questions at the end. If you have I'll also be watching the chat, and we can try to answer some questions along the way as well.
All right, thanks, Ms. Spagnola. So I am Matt Tappan, for those of you who don't know, principal at Council Rock Primary School, and I'm excited to welcome Laura Hurwitz here tonight. I'm going to give a little bit of an intro to her. She'll explain maybe more, but Laura is a resource and referral specialist for the Midwest Family and Community Engagement Center, or FACE Center. Her role within the FACE Center is to support families in understanding the special education process for students ages 5 through 22, to work with educational organizations to build their capacity to engage with families in that process, and to build community partnerships to engage all stakeholders in supporting students with disabilities and their families. Before doing this role, Laura worked as an educator in different settings, including early intervention, preschool special education, general education, pre-kindergarten, and elementary special education. She also spent several years as an early childhood specialist with the Regional Early Childhood Direction Center. Her current position allows her to draw upon nearly 30 years of experience educating children and families in a variety of settings, partnering with community, agencies, and stakeholders, collaborating with multidisciplinary teams working with students with disabilities, and engaging families and caregivers in the facilitation and support of their children's holistic development. So if we can all please welcome Laura. Thank you.
Thank you. And when I hear that, that sounds like it's been quite a career that I've had. And I guess I have had quite a career. I've been really fortunate over the nearly 30 years that I've done this to work in a variety of different settings. And so that's one of the things that I enjoy most about my current position, that is that I really can pull on all of the things that I've done over the years in the various settings, working with all of the students and all of the families and all of the teams, and really try to bring to you information that can support you as family members tonight in thinking about the way in which you are engaging in the special education process and the way in which you are participating in all of those really important decisions and meetings for your students. So I have a PowerPoint that I've put together that has a bunch of different resources in it, and I will walk through it. Certainly, please ask questions along the way. There will be time for Q&A at the end. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a little bit about who I am, differently from how Matt just introduced me, share with you some resources that come along with the work that I do generally, and then I'll dive a little more specifically into some ways in which you can become a really fantastic participant in those meetings, those CSE meetings, those CPSE meetings, whichever meetings you are at where you are talking about your child. I'm hoping to give you some tips and resources so you can feel empowered and prepared to do that. So I'm going to just tell you right off the bat that I have to have this disclaimer in anything that I do because I am under the umbrella of the state education department. And so we try very hard to make sure that all of the resources that we are providing you are up to date. Now, what that basically means is there are sometimes links that we share with you that are broken, and that is not necessarily something that we have control over or that we have known. But this is one of the things that we have found in particular with the state education department website of late. There's been a huge migration to a new web address. And so you may find if you're ever searching on your own and you search for something related to state ed, you may have to find a little bit of a workaround and find the new link. So this is basically just intended to say everything I'm sharing with you to the best of my knowledge is true and complete, and I'm giving you the best that I've got. So this is the agenda that I put together for tonight. So it'll give you an idea of what I'm going to share with you and kind of where we're going. So again, thank you for the really great introduction. I'm going to share a little bit more with you about the contract that I work under that's called the Midwest Family and Community Engagement Center. And I'll talk to you about how that connects to the New York State Education Department Office of Special Education's Educational Partnership. Say that 10 times fast. And then I'll also share with you a resource that we've developed as part of that work that is searchable, that will help you when you're thinking holistically about your student and perhaps looking for some supports that can be found in combination and collaboration to those things that are being done at school. And I'm also going to review with you the brand new, hot off the presses. This is very exciting. New York State Education Department just this past week released a finally updated version of the Parent Guide to Special Education. So the last version was produced back in 2002. So it was over 20 years ago. And so we're very excited that this has now been made available, and we find it to be a lot more parent friendly and a lot more accessible. So I'm going to share that with you. And then, like I said, I'm also going to share some resources and tip sheets that will help to support your role on the Committee on Special Education. So who am I and how can I help you? So I am part of a 4-person team. We live, if you will, at Monroe 1 BOCES. That means that Monroe 1 BOCES is the contract holder for the work that we do. The work that we do, like I said, is a contract under the State Education Department Office of Special Education. We are the FACE Center that represents the Midwest part of New York State. There are FACE centers all across New York State, and the intention is to make sure that families and other stakeholders who are supporting students with disabilities have as much knowledge, information, and understanding as possible to become fully engaged in the special education process. So you'll see there on the screen, there are 2 people on our team who focus on early childhood. So Beth and Barb on the left side there focus on birth to age 5. So if any of you have familiarity with the early intervention program or the Committee on Preschool Special Education, that's really where their expertise lies. And then my colleague, Jennifer Casiopo, and I support the school age side of things. So that basically means kindergarten until either a student exits at the age of 22 because they have aged out, if you will, from the public education system, or when they have graduated, which means that they have fulfilled the requirements for a diploma as they currently stand in New York State. So the region that we support is big. So we support the Monroe 1, Monroe 2, Wayne Finger Lakes, and Genesee Valley BOCES regions, as well as the Rochester City School District. And so that means if you have friends that live in places other than Brighton, we are happy to support them if they live within this region. And if they don't live within this region, I have friends in other FACE centers who can help them. So this is just to give you an idea of the, like I said, the region that we support. So we do have a website, and I was going to share that with you just so you can have some familiarity of where you can go to find some resources to support you as family members learning and navigating the special education process. So the website here has a variety of different resources. It also has some different events listed that are things that are put on not only by us, but by trusted community partners. So you'll see here, there's a resources button. So if you click on that resources button, it will take you to a list of a whole bunch of different things. So we have community and family resources here. We also have resource tools and helpful links. And then down here at the bottom, we have some different guides. So this one down here at the very bottom, this is that parent guide that I mentioned that we're going to talk about tonight. So this is one place that you can access it is by going to our website. We also have an opportunity for you to learn more. So this is a wonderful platform to be able to join you tonight. Everything that we offer is free, and most everything that we do continues to be virtually produced or presented. We generally use the Zoom platform. And so if you were to go to our website and click on the events button, it will take you to a place where you can see the different things that we have coming up. And if you wanted to register, so for example, next week we have a spotlight on family supports. So that means we'll have presenters from Autism Up, Starbridge, and also the navigators from the URMC Behavioral Clinic. And so that would be where you would go to click to be able to register for that. And it would be free. You'd get a link, and we'd love to have you join us. So just a very, very quick marketing of how we are able to support you. Like I said, everything we offer is free. We provide technical assistance and support to families. So please, if you have questions, reach out. We're here to help you. Whoops. So I mentioned that we are also part of what's called the New York State Education Department Office of Special Education's Educational Partnership. So this is a statewide network that is intended to increase and improve outcomes for students with disabilities. So the FACE Center is one component of that. There's also a contract called the Regional Partnership Center, and their job is to work very closely with schools and special education programs to help them build their capacity to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. So between the FACE Center and the Regional Partnership Center, it's really an umbrella that's intended to support all stakeholders to make sure that from birth to age 22, we are providing education, information, clarification, technical assistance, coaching, all different kinds of things under the umbrella of special education to really make sure that we are doing what's best for kids and helping them to reach their best possible outcomes. So if you're interested, you can go to that website. These links will also be included in the drive information that's shared out with all of you afterwards, however the PTSA shares that with you. I'll make sure that those links are available there. We also have what's called the community resource map. And so I'm going to click from this link here and hope that it goes where it's supposed to go. Oh, no, it doesn't want to do that. So just kidding, we're not going to do that right now, but you can find that on your own. It's pretty easy to navigate. And let me see if I actually did open it back here in the behind the scenes. I actually did. So I'm still trying to get used to Teams. I'm so used to Zoom that I have to sometimes remember which platform I'm using and where did I put things. So this is the OSE Partnership website. And on here, there's also a resources button. And I'm going to show you this because within this resources section, there is a whole list of information that's available to families. So you'll see here on the right side, all of these different presentations on the right side here are available to families. So if you, for example, wanted to know about what is an individualized education program for families of school-age students, you could click on this drop down. And if you were to click on this right here, it would open up the slide deck for you and you'd be able to have information right at your fingertips about what is an IEP. So just again, another place where you can be educating yourself and finding information to support the role that you are playing. So the map that I mentioned is right here. And so this is, I'm just going to say block. I don't need them to know where I am. So this is the community resource map. And the way in which you can use this is a statewide map. And this is intended to share information in a variety of different categories. And it's really intended to support the needs of individuals with disabilities. So if you wanted to search, you could search either by agency name or you could filter. So I'm just going to filter and say that I'm looking for information about Monroe County. And then if I filter by service type, I can scroll down here and I can look in these different categories and look for supports for what I might need. So say hypothetically, I wanted to know about educational resources for families, and I wanted to know about after school programs, and I wanted to know about transportation. So I would then, and I wanted to know about it for school age, and then I would hit apply. And it would generate for you a list here on the left side of all of the different supports and services and agencies that are available that meet some of that criteria that I just selected. The other thing that's really great about this is you see here where the button says English, you can actually translate this information into many different languages. So if you are a family or you have a friend who needs to have something translated into a different language, that is something that is available through this website. So again, just trying to inform you, build your tools, fill your toolbox with different things that can help to support you in the really amazing role that you are doing as supporting your children as family members. So now I'm going to move into the parent guide. And so this is, there are many, many resources that are available from the New York State Education Department. And if you were to go onto their website, there are parent resource pages. There is an Office of Early Learning page that has amazing resources. So if you're all primary age parents, that Office of Early Learning is incredible. And that is a link. If I remember, I will make sure to drop in a links collection as well from this evening. But what I'm going to focus on tonight is Special Education in New York State for Preschool and School-Age Students with Disabilities, a Parent's Guide. And if you are interested, and I don't know how you're all joining, if you're on your phone or if you're on a computer, but you certainly can, if one of you who are here helping are able to type that link into the chat box, that would be amazing. And if people could click on it from the chat box, that would be great. The other option is people can certainly use the QR code and go to the guide. The guide is in the drive of information. I'm not going to go page by page through it. What I'm actually going to do, I'm going to just quickly run through the different components of information that are in it. And then I've picked a couple of key highlight points that I wanted to really just impress upon all of you, because these are the areas from which we tend to get the most questions. So as you look at this, you'll see here that this guide is not only for let me back up. This guide is wonderful because it is an introduction to special education for families who may be entering into the referral process and who are new to special education. It's also great because it has information for families who are already in special education, whose children are already eligible, and who are going to be getting ready for either annual review or reevaluation. Thank you, Matt, for dropping that in. I appreciate it. And so you'll find that there are many different access points within this guide. There's also some very helpful information and attachments that come at the end that focus on special education process, and then the timelines that are associated with both the Committee on Special Education and the Committee on Preschool Special Education. That's one of the hardest things to understand and navigate when you are making a referral and you want to know when everything's going to happen and why isn't it happening faster. So there are timelines that are put in place by regulation that make sure that when a referral is made, that a district is responding to that. And so there's information about that in those timelines. And then, like I said, there's just information all throughout that is great for both families who are new to the process and then families who are already involved in the process. So I'm going to now go ahead to the next slide. And I'm going to talk about a highlight that is found in section 1. So one of the questions that we get a lot at the FACE Center is, why wasn't my child found eligible for special education? Well, there's lots and lots of reasons why that's the case. But one of the reasons why is that when we are thinking about eligibility for a student, we have to make sure that we have exhausted all possible supports under general education before we look at that special education component. And so this box here is from page 7 in the parent guide, and it does a really great job of explaining what's called MTSSI. So MTSSI stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support Integrated. And what that means is that within education, we have different supports that are available to help our students build their skills in both academic, social, emotional, and behavioral areas. And we do that in a tiered way. So when we look at MTSSI, you'll see there in the blue box, there's tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So when we're thinking about a referral to special education, and we're thinking about the way in which we're meeting students' needs, it's really important that we make sure that we've worked really closely with all of the members of the student's team to make sure that we've explored all of these different ways of providing that support before we look at that special education component. And like I said, it's a general education support. And we always say that all of our students are general education students first. So even if a student is found eligible for special education and they have an IEP, an individualized education program, they are still able to be supported by things like MTSSI that exist within the general education realm to work holistically to make sure that we are meeting the needs of students. Because ultimately, our job is to make sure that all of our students are getting access to the general education curriculum. They're receiving that really high quality, rigorous academic instruction. And so this is one of the ways in which we do that. So we know that we have to engage in this process of looking at these tiered interventions before we consider eligibility. And we have to do that with fidelity. So there are goals that get set, there's progress monitoring that happens, there's ways in which teachers are looking at students and support staff are looking at students and making sure that we're targeting their individual needs in these different ways before we necessarily move into the world of special education. And so it's also very important to know, and this is something that we find families have a lot of questions around, that last point there, a student with a disability can receive both general education and special education supports. And a lot of times that depends upon what the area is and the type of support that's being provided. But it's important to know that MTSSI is an umbrella and it supports all students. So that was just one piece that I wanted to point out from that section 1 and really highlight that, because like I said, we do get a lot of questions around that. So the next thing that I wanted to focus on comes from section 4, and that's on page 18 in the guide. And this is the concept of what's called least restrictive environment. So this is also a really hot topic that we get a lot of questions on. And this is largely because it's hard to sometimes understand why, as parents, we can't just say, well, I want my student to have X, Y, Z, and you should do it for me. So there's a process in place that makes sure that we are working through a continuum of placements and of service settings before we are putting a student into what we would consider the most restrictive environment, which means they are having the least interaction with their general education peers. So when we talk about least restrictive environment, it's important to know that this comes from federal law. So this is part of what's called a free appropriate public education, and that's for students with disabilities. It's a protection. So that means that this is an entitlement. And you saw perhaps on that list of information that's contained in the parent's guide, there is a parent rights section, and that helps to explain some of these components a little bit more in depth. But really, it's important to know that when we are looking at that least restrictive environment, we are looking at making sure that our students with disabilities are being educated in the general education setting and having access to the general education curriculum with their general education same age peers. So the only time that we start to look at moving into smaller settings or what we would consider more restrictive settings is that second bullet or third bullet point right there, where it says all supplementary aids and services deemed appropriate for the individual student must be exhausted and demonstrate that education cannot be satisfactorily achieved prior to a change of placement to a more restrictive setting. So basically what that means is we have to use the IEP. We have to look at the students' needs. We have to look at their present levels of performance. We have to look at the programs, the supports, the services, the accommodations, all of the things that we have written into the individualized education program, and make sure that we are doing all of those things and doing those things with fidelity before we look at an out-of-district placement or we look at a smaller setting. And so this is something that we find can be hard to understand at times. And Deanna or Matt, if you have thoughts on this and you want to jump in, please do, because we also always tell families this is a Committee on Special Education conversation. And in all of this information, this always defers back to the Committee on Special Education. So your chairperson is the person who really is the one who oversees that committee and helps to make sure that all of the participants are working together to make the best program for students possible. But like I said right there at that bottom, this is a CSE decision that is made with input from all members and in consideration with what is demonstrated on the IEP. So I'll pause and see if there's any additional thoughts that either of you want to offer from the school perspective.
Thanks for including us. I'll just jump in and say, sometimes for chairperson, you might see me as the chairperson. You very, very often will see your school building psychologist as the chairperson, or from time to time, an assistant principal or another staff member may sit in as chairperson as well. But to emphasize the point that Laura made, it is input from all members. And I know something that I say in meetings often, everyone's voice is just as important as the other. And sometimes what happens is there's a lot of times when the educators around the table may get into their educational jargon. And I certainly do invite parents, family members, and any guest that comes with a family member to say, time out, hold on, stop, explain something to me. But yes, every voice needs to be heard and represented.
Excellent. Thank you. And like I said, and I will say this always, and I forgot to say this at the beginning. So our job is to be a bridge. Our job is to support you in making your connection with, in this case, Brighton. So we are not advocates. My job is not to attend a meeting with you to to help fight, if you will, for whatever it is that you are hoping to accomplish for your student. My job is to support you behind the scenes and to work collaboratively with the district to make sure that everyone has the necessary information to be able to come to the table and make those decisions collaboratively for students. So I apologize. I should have said that at the very beginning, but that is definitely something that I would like for all of you to take away from this, is that we are a support. You know, I joke sometimes and say that I have 2 children, and my children are, one is still in Brighton and one is a graduate of Brighton. One's a recent graduate, which is crazy to say that I have a high school graduate. But one of the things that I often say is, you know, I'll say something to the kids and they'll act like I'm speaking a foreign language. And then my husband will say the same message, just worded a little bit differently or somehow delivered differently. And all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. And so I sometimes say that that's also our role. You know, our job is to reinforce regulations. Our job is to reinforce the information that's being given to you by the district and help you to understand how that's impacting decisions that are being made for your students, how that's coming together to make those decisions about programming, etc. And so sometimes it can be just helpful to call us up and say, you know, I heard this. Can you just explain it to me in a different way? So that's absolutely a role that we can help to play. And we can be, you know, thought partners, we can be brainstorming partners, a variety of different things, but we are not advocates, and our job and our focus always is to be building that bridge and to be making sure that the relationship that you are building with the district is a positive one, because my kids were in Brighton their entire educational career. And so unless you're going to move, this is a lot of time that you will be spending, you know, focused on your child's development and their education. So you want to make sure that you have as best of a relationship as possible. All right, so enough about LRE and all of that. So the last thing that I wanted to highlight from the Parents Guide is this is a section from the Rights for Parents. And I pulled this because it was perfect that Deanna said this, because this is like absolutely echoing what she just said. So I'm going to give you a minute to look at the screen. And then if you want to, or you feel comfortable, I'm going to ask you to think about what you notice or what you wonder related to what you see here on the screen. So curious if anyone who is joining us this evening sees anything that really stands out to them or that really makes them pause and wonder, have any questions. So I will say that the word equal member, those words at the top there, that absolutely echoes what Deanna was saying, and recognizing that everyone at the table has a really important voice in making these decisions and in bringing information to the table. The piece also there about children benefiting more from their education if their parents are involved and well informed. So I talked about outcomes. We know by evidence and research that this is very true. So by being here, you are doing an amazing job of informing yourself, of educating yourself, of making sure that you are prepared to be involved in those meetings and in those conversations. And so right here, simply by being here today, you are doing an amazing job and you are building your capacity to be an equal member of the team. Any other thoughts or wonderings?
The thought I'll jump in, Laura, is it's more of the first phrase. And oftentimes people will jump in to remind the team that no one knows your child better than you do as the parent. we or the educational team might know them between 8 and 2:30, 2:45 in a way that's different than home, but no one knows them the way a parent does.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That's absolutely correct. Not that there were right or wrong answers. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some tips and resources about how you can be prepared to participate in meetings. And again, these are resources that you will find in the Google Drive link that will be shared with you. So you don't have to try to figure out where they are. That's where they will be living. And I'm not going to try to drop them in the chat box because I cannot for the life of me figure out how to do that on Teams. So just trust that they will be there for you. So these are just some general tips, and I took these off of actually one of the resources that I'm going to share. But these are just some basic things that you can do to help prepare yourself for those meetings. So making sure that you're reviewing reports and information, looking at that draft IEP, so that you can go into the meeting with questions that you might have. If you have information that you want to make sure gets brought to the point of conversation, having reviewed everything ahead of time will help you to be able to do that. Also talking with your child's team ahead of the meeting. So one of the hard things about the CSE meeting is that it's a confined amount of time. But we know that there are often other conversations along the way that have to happen. We can never make decisions outside of the Committee on Special Education because decisions are a CSE-based situation, and we never want to make any kind of predeterminations ahead of a meeting. But it's really important to have conversations along the way to understand, how is my child doing? What are things looking like? You know, if you only talk to your team once a year when you have your annual review meeting, you're not necessarily going to be able to have all the information you need in order to be a participant in the conversation. So making sure that you're talking with the team ahead of time is really important. In whatever context that you have set up for that, be it parent-teacher conferences, whatever it may be, just making sure that you're having those opportunities for communication. So another suggestion that we always offer is to write down questions ahead of time, because in the moment, it can be really hard to be put on the spot and to think of what it is that you want to say or what questions you want to ask. And I'm going to show you another resource on the next slide that can help you to gather some of those thoughts and be prepared also for participating in those conversations around those present levels of performance. But write down questions you have ahead of time so that you're prepared. You might also want to consider inviting someone to attend with you. And I think I heard Deanna mention that. Having someone attend with you can also be helpful because they can be listening for things. I know there are many times when I've had conversations about my children and my emotional brain kicks in and my logic listening brain stops. And so having someone there with you who's able to either prompt you for things that you know that you've had conversation with them about. Also, being able to have someone who can help provide a different perspective of your child can also be really helpful. So know that you are able to invite someone to come along with you, and that can be a really important support. Identify ahead of time what you believe will help support your child's growth and development. So like it said, you know your children best. I often think back to the time when my kiddos were home, learning from home. And all of the things that I learned about them as learners and students by watching them that I had never seen before. And just like the teachers and your children's team, they see them for a certain portion of the day. You see them for another portion of the day. And ultimately, our job in everything we do is to make sure that we are preparing our students to be successful, capable adults and human beings. And so we really need to make sure that we are looking at all of their needs when we are doing that. And then lastly, knowing your parental rights and what to do if there are disagreements. So there will be disagreements, that happens. But it's important to know that the committee has to make a decision. So meetings can't be tabled, they can't be put on pause. There has to be a decision made. You as a parent, if you disagree, you are able to say, I don't agree with that decision and this is why. And then that will be noted, and then further conversation can happen. Perhaps another meeting can be called. But it's important to know that even in the face of disagreement, decisions do still have to be made. And ultimately, it's the chairperson's job to make sure that the meeting moves forward and concludes with a decision. So knowing your parental rights, like I said, there's that whole parental rights section in the guide, is something that's really important just to have an awareness of. So if you find yourself in a situation where you need to explore options, you are informed about how you can do that. So now I'm going to move more specifically, and these are the actual resources that are in the drive for you. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on each of them because you can certainly explore them on your own, but I just want to highlight for you what is there. So this particular tip sheet, if you will, again, covers some of those additional components that I've already talked about are in the parent guide, and then some extra things. So this has information about parent rights. It talks about how you're a team member. So there is actual regulatory guidance about who the members of the Committee on Special Education and the Committee on Preschool Special Education need to be. And a parent is absolutely a required member of those different committees. This also has a section where there are questions you can ask at a meeting, and then also tips to help you prepare for the meeting. Within this tip sheet, there's also classification information. So that's a question that we sometimes get from families is, how is the classification decided? So this is especially something that we hear from families who are moving from the Committee on Preschool Special Education to School Age Special Education. So for those of you that were your children were receiving services during preschool, you might recall that in preschool, the classification is a preschooler with a disability. But then when the student enters school age special education, we have to pick one of those 13 classification categories that's in regulation. And so the committee has the responsibility to look at those and pick the classification that best meets the student's needs. And so there's classification information that you can find as part of that. And that is the link that you will need. So when I mentioned earlier, those links from State Ed have changed. If you ever see a P12 start to State Ed web address, that is old and NYSED is new. So I'll also make sure that this PowerPoint, that the slide deck is available so you can click on the links in the PDF. And then there's also information about the continuum. So I mentioned that concept of least restrictive environment. So the continuum is set up to allow us to look at different sizes of classes and different types of supports and levels of supports for our students with disabilities. And there's a progression that happens. So we don't just jump from a full traditional general education classroom setting to an out-of-district placement, for example. We have to do some due diligence along the way to look at how we are getting to that ultimate decision. And so that continuum information helps with some of that. And then there's also information there about what if you disagree. And so, like I said, disagreements will happen. Being able to voice what it is that you are disagreeing with, and then being able to have some follow-up conversation after the fact, that is certainly part of it. If ever it got to a point, and I am sort of obligated to share this, but I do think it's an excellent resource. Special education mediation is always an option for families. And if that was something you felt you wanted more information on, we can certainly, as the FACE Center, provide that information. It's part of your due process rights and all of those different things. So the point is, disagreements happen, but we always want to work collectively and collaboratively to resolve them as collaboratively, as peacefully, as positively as possible for the students. And there's lots of different ways that we can do that. So reach out to us if you need support in understanding those things. So I mentioned, how can I share information about my child? That was one of the things that you can do to prepare. So we have this really great handout and we love it. So this is Council Rock, and we love that this particular one that we have is, we like to think this is our primary one because it looks sort of primary-ish, if you will. We have lots of different All About Me tools. So if you needed something that was for a student who was maybe a little bit beyond where this might be what you were looking for, we can certainly provide that to you. But what's great about this is an opportunity for you to brainstorm ahead of time your thoughts. And I know that there were times when I sat on the Committee for Special Education, and I was part of a team who was welcoming in a family whose child was transitioning from preschool. And it was always great to have a picture of the child, so we could have a face to put with the name. And it just helped a little bit to make it a little bit more personalized. It gave a little bit of a different spin on, the conversation, looking at a child and thinking about them. It's nice. So having that place there where you can put a picture. So again, this is just one tool, but it's an opportunity for you to do some brainstorming ahead of time to be prepared to participate in those conversations. So communication is key. I mentioned talking with your child's teachers ahead of time. So this particular tip sheet highlights some questions that you can be asking of your teachers. So these are also things you can be thinking about. You might have parent-teacher conferences coming up. I feel like we're nearing the end of the first marking period, so I'm not sure where we are with conference days. We don't have those in the high school anymore, but if you are preparing for those and you want to go in and think about what you might want to ask your child's teacher, there are some tips there of things that you can be asking. And then there's the prompts for the questions up at the top, and then there's also some tips and expectations at the bottom. So that's specifically with respect to talking with your child's teachers. And then, so the big question is, can I ask questions at the meeting? Absolutely, 100% yes, you absolutely can, you should. I think it's hopefully been articulated here that your voice is very important and you are an equal member. So if you are confused, like Deanna said, say time out. Hold up. I need a pause. I need some clarification. Please provide me with more information. Can you further explain? Can you tell me more about? Any of those types of things are absolutely appropriate and absolutely within your rights. And so this particular tip sheet has some questions that you can specifically use for engaging in conversation with the Committee on Special Education during those meetings. And they can hopefully be a guide for you in terms of being a part of that conversation as an equal participant. So I'm now at the point, I've spoken a lot, so thank you for listening. We always try to give you as many resources as we possibly can in the time that we have with you. And so now I would love to open it up to any questions that people would have for me or for Deanna or for Matt. I can't answer district-specific questions. I can answer general types of questions, but this is one of the reasons why we love partnering with district personnel, because it gives us an opportunity to learn more about the way things are done where you are, and it gives them an opportunity to provide really clear direction for what you can expect in this case in Brighton. So any questions, feel free to unmute or put it in the chat, and I'm going to go quiet and just give you time to think and ask questions. So Kyle, I see that you, go ahead. Deanna, I am going to be quiet and you facilitate. We should have clarified that. So I'm going quiet.
That's
you
okay.
facilitate.
I think Kyle has a question. Kyle, you're welcome to unmute. Go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah. So if we have some sort of confusion or we need a point of contact to discuss our child's accommodations or whatever, who should be our point of contact for that sort of thing?
I'm going to jump in and say the first point of contact would be the case manager or classroom teacher, starting there first. Then the next chain of command would probably be at Council Rock would be Emily Hopkins, the school psychologist, and or Katie Schaefer, assistant principal. But I really would begin with your child's classroom teacher.
Okay, thank you.
And I see that Ray has a hand up.
Hi there. I'm interested in discussing this conversation in the context of students who are twice exceptional. And I have a high school student, and we are sort of just starting down this road. And I have always wondered that, and not, I finally stopped pushing them into some of the higher, trying to get them access to some of the gifted programs because they're just so overwhelmed. But I guess I'm giving you more specific information than I need to. I'd love to hear more about twice exceptional students and supports for them and what maybe I can be thinking about as we move into this process.
I want to ask more specific questions, but now is probably not the right forum to do that, but I could certainly follow up giving you a call tomorrow or an email with more specifics. But I will say here in the district, we do have students who let me back up. There is not a classification for twice exceptional. That's not in the New York State regulations of a classification code or category, I should say. But We do have students where we will acknowledge that either on a student's plan, whether it's an IEP or a 504, when there are areas of significant great strength, but there are other areas that get in that student's way or hurdles for them to be able to access their learning. So the conversation at the CSE table would be around how do we make sure that that student can access those, whether it's accelerated, advanced, AP, what do we need to make sure is in place so they have access to those courses? That was a broad answer to, I think, a much more specific question that you're asking, Ray.
Thank you.
Laura, I don't know if you have anything to add on that from your realm.
I think you hit on it when you talked about either the IEP or the 504 plan. You know, what we always tell families is that that's what guides the program. So we look at the present levels of performance, we look at the needs that have been identified, and then that's how we shape the program for a student. And so for a student who would be twice exceptional, it would be no different in that you would be looking at their present levels of performance, and then you would be creating a program that would meet those needs. So the IEP really is that's the legal document. But it's really the roadmap. And so we have to make sure that we're creating a really strong IEP that really captures a very good picture of the student and whatever capacity that may be. And then that's what then when we implement that, that's where we're making sure that they're having access to general education curriculum, they're having those accommodations, those modifications, all of those different things. So really that's the nuts and bolts of it. And then we go from there.
Ray, do you have another question there? I see the hand raised. I want to make sure I'm not ignoring you if you have a secondary question.
No, I'm not good at technology.
No, that's okay. That's all right. I'm right there with you. No worries. All right, we've got another question. Gerald.
Yes, hi. It was mentioned at some point earlier about how when attending a CSE meeting, like having like an additional member present or additional resource if you want to. I have a kindergartner and we did like the CSE to CPSE meeting and I kind of looked into like having the what do you call additional parent member. Is that still a service that can be provided and how much? Because when you had that meeting, I didn't necessarily get that person attending the meeting. Like, how early do we need to let you guys know that we need it? Because we don't know anybody specifically that we feel like can attend with us. So, is there like a
We
list of resources that?
So that would be a communication either to the building or right to my office. We've done it a couple different ways. Obviously, the sooner we know you would like that person to attend, the better, because then that guarantees that that person, I have had families the day before ask, and that, our parent members might not be available within that short notice. Sometimes I have, we've been able to have a parent member come, or other times we have been able to connect parents with somebody who maybe isn't an official parent member, but also may have had a similar experience. And then what I would do is reach out to that individual and say, would you be willing to talk to Mr. C? And can I share, are you welcome? Let me share your information. And then I kind of am a matchmaker in that regard and connect you with another parent. Sometimes you need that conversation outside of the CSE with a parent. Sometimes you want that person at the table with you. It all depends on each individual.
Okay, okay, makes sense. I felt like I might have asked for it a bit late, so that's fine as well. And like
Okay.
everything worked out. So,
And
but
my
I'm just
example that I
keeping it.
gave about 24 hours was not directed at you at
Yeah,
all. I
yeah.
apologize. It was just a general statement.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily like complaining as well. So
Sure.
it's more of like just trying to get informed and like I'm still want to make sure that that's still an option that we have for our next meeting. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. I will say too, if people have questions that you may think of later, you're certainly more than welcome to reach out to my office or directly to Emily, to Mr. Tappan, Mrs. Schaefer, or your classroom teacher.
So I just want to say thanks for coming. This has been incredible. Laura, again, thank you very much for, sharing your knowledge with us. I think it was great. And I hope everybody took something away from it. I will be sharing this out with the greater community, along with Laura's references and any links that she has over the next few days. I don't know if it will come out in tomorrow's Tap-in Times, but if not, I will send it out next week when we have it all put together, along with a recording of this. So the people who weren't able to come can benefit from it. But if you who are here want to go back and listen or see certain things, you can always review it. So again, thanks to Laura, thanks to Deanna, thanks to Jackie and Amanda. I don't know if Amanda was able to jump on, but for organizing and getting this set up, I think it's a great resource for our families.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for inviting me to join you.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much. I'm going to stop recording and there we go.